This is a semiconductor. 14 nanometers of etched silicon, smaller than a human cell, containing more transistors than there are people on Earth. The device you're watching this on contains billions of them. Your car contains thousands. The modern world runs on chips, and whoever controls chips controls the future. For 30 years, that control belonged to an uneasy trinity: American design, Taiwanese manufacturing, Japanese equipment. Each leg of the stool depended on the others, each leg assuming the arrangement would continue indefinitely. That arrangement ended 4 days ago. On January 22, 2026, at 9 a.m. Tokyo time, Prime Minister Ishida and Taiwan's President Lai signed the Pacific Semiconductor Security Compact, a mutual defense and technology integration agreement that merges Japanese equipment monopolies with Taiwanese manufacturing dominance into a single, unified bloc. The compact isn't a trade deal. It's not an investment framework. It's a strategic weapon aimed directly at Beijing's semiconductor ambitions, and it's designed to ensure those ambitions never succeed. China's response came within hours, a declaration that the compact constitutes an act of technological warfare and a promise of comprehensive countermeasures. The Taiwan Strait, already tense, is now one miscalculation away from conflict. And Japan, pacifist Japan, Article 9 Japan, the Japan that hasn't fired a shot in anger since 1945, just announced it's willing to go to war over computer chips. Here's what they're not telling you. The semiconductor supply chain has a vulnerability that most analysts discuss abstractly, but few quantify precisely. Taiwan manufactures 92% of the world's most advanced chips, nodes at 7 nanometers and below. TSMC alone accounts for 84%, but those chips cannot be manufactured without equipment that comes overwhelmingly from 5 Japanese companies: Tokyo Electron, Screen Holdings, Advantest, Lasertec, and Disco Corporation. Together, these firms control approximately 33% of global semiconductor equipment, but in specific critical categories, their market share approaches 100%. Lasertec produces the only commercially viable inspection equipment for extreme ultraviolet lithography masks. Without Lasertec, you cannot verify EUV masks work. Without verified masks, you cannot manufacture advanced chips. Market share, 100%. Tokyo Electron produces the coding and developing equipment essential for photolithography. Alternatives exist, but scaling alternatives to production volume requires 5 to 7 years. Effective market share for leading-edge production, 87%. Screen Holdings dominates wet processing equipment for cleaning and etching. Their technology removes particles 1/10 the size of the features being manufactured. Market share in advanced nodes, 79%. China has spent $150 billion since 2014 trying to build domestic semiconductor capability. The money bought fabs, hired engineers, acquired companies. It did not buy the Japanese equipment that makes those fabs produce working chips. The Pacific Semiconductor Security Compact formalizes what was already practice. Japanese equipment will not flow to China. But it goes further, much further. At 11:30 a.m. Tokyo time on January 22nd, the full text of the compact was released. I've read all 234 pages. The document contains provisions that transform semiconductor manufacturing from an industry into an alliance. Article 7 establishes equipment sovereignty, a legal framework that treats Japanese semiconductor equipment as strategic assets equivalent to weapons systems. Export to non-aligned nations requires cabinet-level approval with a presumption of denial. Article 12 creates manufacturing integration protocols that embed Japanese engineers in Taiwanese fabs and Taiwanese process engineers in Japanese equipment development. The knowledge sharing creates dependencies that would take decades to untangle. Article 18, the provision that triggered China's technological warfare statement, commits Japan to all necessary measures to defend Taiwan's semiconductor infrastructure from coercion, blockade, or military action. All necessary measures. In diplomatic language, that phrase includes military force. Japan just extended a security guarantee to Taiwan that it has never extended to any nation since World War II. At 3:45 p.m. Eastern on January 22nd, I spoke with a former Japanese defense official who helped draft the Self-Defense Forces Taiwan contingency plans. He agreed to speak anonymously. The compact changes everything. Article 9 constrains Japanese offensive action, but semiconductor defense is defensive. If China blockades Taiwan, Japan can legally escort shipping. If China attacks Taiwan's fabs, Japan can legally provide defensive systems. The legal architecture for Japanese intervention now exists. I asked about Chinese military response. Beijing understands what this means. They've spent 20 years building military capability to take Taiwan before America can respond. The compact adds Japan to the response calculation. The PLA's timeline just compressed, which makes them more dangerous, not less. I asked whether war was likely. War is now a scenario that must be planned for, not a theoretical concern. The compact makes semiconductor supply the trigger for great power conflict. That's not accidental. Tokyo decided they'd rather risk war than risk losing semiconductor leverage. This is where the lie becomes unsustainable. China's semiconductor strategy assumed that commercial relationships would eventually deliver the technology they needed. If not American designs, then Taiwanese manufacturing. If not Taiwanese manufacturing, then Japanese equipment. If not purchase, then theft. If not theft, then indigenous development funded by unlimited state resources. The compact closes each door systematically. American export controls, tightened repeatedly since 2022, already blocked advanced chip sales and design software. The CHIPS Act reshored some manufacturing and prohibited recipients from expanding in China. The compact completes the containment. Japanese equipment, the category China believed was most accessible because Japan prioritized commercial relationships, is now explicitly blocked. The remaining pathway is indigenous development. But indigenous development faces a timing problem. China's most advanced domestic production is currently at 7 nanometer, using SMIC's workaround techniques that produce lower yields and higher costs than TSMC. The leading edge has moved to 3 nanometers, with 2 nanometers in production ramp. By the time China reaches 5 nanometer reliability, the frontier will be at 1 nanometer. The technology treadmill moves faster than China can run. And with Japanese equipment blocked, the treadmill just accelerated. At 9 p.m. Beijing time on January 22nd, China's Ministry of Commerce announced emergency reviews of all technology cooperation with Japanese firms. The reviews are the precursor to retaliation, identifying where China has leverage and how to apply it. The leverage is real, but limited. China is Japan's largest trading partner. Japanese manufacturers depend on Chinese supply chains for components, assembly, and increasingly for sophisticated subassemblies. Automotive is most exposed. Toyota, Honda, and Nissan source significant components from Chinese suppliers. Japanese electronics companies assemble products in Chinese factories. Disrupting these relationships would cause genuine economic damage, but the damage would be mutual. China needs Japanese automotive technology more than Japan needs Chinese assembly. China needs Japanese industrial equipment, precision instruments, and advanced materials that have no domestic substitutes. The asymmetry favors Japan, which is why Beijing's initial response was rhetorical rather than substantive. The comprehensive countermeasures promised within hours have not materialized within days. Less than 30 days separate today from the expected Chinese response window. The delay isn't hesitation, it's calculation. Beijing is modeling scenarios, identifying pressure points, preparing measures that cause maximum damage to Japan with minimum damage to China. The likely response vector is rare earths. China controls 60% of rare earth mining and 90% of rare earth processing. Japanese electronics, automotive, and defense industries depend on rare earth materials that have no immediate substitute. A rare earth embargo against Japan would be devastating, but also costly for China, which would lose its largest customer and accelerate Japanese investment in alternative sources. The weapon can only be fired once. The semiconductor timing creates urgency. Every month, the compact remains in effect. Japanese equipment integration with Taiwanese manufacturing deepens. Every month, China falls further behind on leading-edge production. Every month, the window for technological catch-up narrows. Beijing knows this. The response will come. The only questions are timing and targeting. While Beijing calculates, markets reprice. The semiconductor equipment sector responded to the compact announcement with the largest single-day moves in industry history. Tokyo Electron rose 23% on January 23rd. Screen Holdings rose 28%. Lasertech rose 34%. The Japanese equipment monopolies are now priced as strategic assets with guaranteed demand from the Taiwan-Japan bloc. TSMC rose 18% on the same day, reflecting the security guarantee that reduces invasion risk and the equipment integration that ensures manufacturing superiority continues. The losers were equally clear. SMIC fell 31%. Huahong fell 27%. Every Chinese semiconductor company repriced to reflect the reality that catching up just became dramatically harder. The American semiconductor companies occupied an uncertain middle. Intel rose 4%, benefiting from reduced Chinese competition. Nvidia fell 6%, reflecting concerns about Chinese market access. AMD was flat, their exposure balanced between positive and negative factors. The reshaping is not complete. The market is pricing in the compact, but not yet pricing in the Chinese response. When that response comes, and it will come, the repricing continues. The strategic logic of the compact extends beyond semiconductors. Understanding why Japan took this step requires understanding what Japan fears. Japan is an island nation, dependent on imports for food, energy, and raw materials. The sea lanes that supply Japan run past Taiwan. A Taiwan controlled by Beijing is a Taiwan that can interdict Japanese shipping at will. Japanese strategists don't view Taiwan as a democracy to be defended or a semiconductor supplier to be protected. They view Taiwan as a barrier island. If the barrier falls, Japan is exposed. The semiconductor framing allows Japan to act on this geographic imperative while maintaining rhetorical commitment to peaceful resolution. Japan isn't defending Taiwan, Japan is defending semiconductors. The distinction is diplomatic fiction, but diplomatic fictions have value. The compact also positions Japan for a world where American commitment to Asian security is uncertain. The Trump and Biden administrations both reinforce Taiwan commitments, but American politics is volatile. Japan cannot build long-term strategy on assumptions about American elections. The compact creates a Japan-Taiwan axis that functions with or without American participation. If America is engaged, the axis strengthens the alliance. If America withdraws, the axis provides insurance. Japan is hedging against its own ally. At 6 a.m. Tokyo time on January 24th, Japan's Minister of Economy, Trade, and Industry gave a press conference elaborating on the compact's implementation. Japanese semiconductor equipment is not a commercial product. It is the foundation of technological civilization. The compact ensures this foundation serves nations that share our values: democracy, rule of law, open markets. Nations that reject these values have no claim on our technology. The statement explicitly frames equipment access as values-based, not commercially based. The framing is designed to survive legal challenges. Trade restrictions based on commercial criteria face WTO scrutiny, while restrictions based on security and values have broader exemptions. But the framing is also ideological. Japan is declaring that semiconductors are too important to be subject to market logic. The nation that pioneered export-led industrialization is now declaring that some exports are too dangerous to permit. The irony is not lost on Asian observers. Japan's industrial rise depended on access to American technology and markets that America could have restricted but chose not to. Japan is now restricting access to nations following the same developmental path Japan once followed. What the informed understand is that the Pacific Semiconductor Security Compact represents the end of globalized technology. The assumption that technology would flow freely, that commercial relationships would transcend political boundaries, is now formally abandoned. The semiconductor industry will bifurcate. A Western-aligned bloc, America, Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, the Netherlands, Germany, will share technology and integrate supply chains. A China-centered bloc will develop independent capability, accepting lower performance and higher costs as the price of autonomy. The bifurcation has been underway since 2019, but the compact accelerates it dramatically. Japanese equipment was the last major category still flowing to China through commercial channels. That flow has stopped. The economic implications are significant. China represents 25 to 30% of global semiconductor demand. Chinese fabs were major customers for Japanese equipment. The lost sales will impact Japanese company revenues, offset partially by increased demand from the Western bloc, but not entirely. The strategic implications are more significant still. China's military modernization depends on advanced semiconductors. Their hypersonic missiles, their satellite networks, their AI-enabled systems all require chips China cannot currently manufacture domestically. The compact constrains Chinese military capability directly, not through sanctions or threats, but through equipment monopolies that cannot be circumvented without decades of development. The military constraint creates military risk. A China that believes it will never catch up technologically is a China that might act before the gap becomes insurmountable. The compact closes the door on peaceful catch-up, which raises the probability of non-peaceful alternatives. The Taiwan Strait is 90 miles wide. The fabs that manufacture 92% of advanced chips are on one side. The nation that believes those chips are essential to its future is on the other. The Pacific Semiconductor Security Compact didn't create this tension, but it crystallized it. It drew a line and dared Beijing to cross it. The chip in your phone weighs less than a gram, 14 nanometers of etched silicon, containing logic gates that switch billions of times per second. The engineering required to create it represents humanity's most sophisticated manufacturing achievement. That achievement is now the centerpiece of great power competition. Not oil, not territory, not ideology. Chips. Japan bet its future on controlling the equipment that makes chips possible. Taiwan bet its survival on being indispensable to chip production. America bet its technological edge on designing chips others manufacture. China bet its rise on acquiring chip capability through any means available. The compact calls China's bet. It says, "You will not acquire this capability. Not through purchase, not through theft, not through development, not in time." How China responds to being told not will determine whether the Pacific remains at peace. The next 30 days will reveal whether Beijing accepts the constraint or challenges it. The semiconductor, 14 nanometers, a billion transistors, smaller than a cell, has become the most consequential object on Earth. Wars have been fought over oil. Wars have been fought over territory. The next war, if it comes, may be fought over chips. Japan and Taiwan just announced they're willing to fight that war. China just announced they consider it an act of war. The only remaining question is whether act of war becomes actual war. 90 miles of water, 92% of advanced production, one compact that changed everything. The countdown to clarity has begun.